Doing a year of service has just been my way of saying thank you to all of the people who mentored me. I'm Charlotte, and I have been an Americorps member since January of 2021. During the pandemic, I moved back to Flint to be with my 80-year-old mother. And in doing so, I thought, wow, this is the perfect time for me to give back to my hometown. With me starting during the pandemic, I am just so grateful for this service position because it has kept me outwardly focused. It has kept me happy because I love to serve and to know that I've been able to help others. Because something that's really important to me is bridging the gap between generations. I grew up with my grandparents here in Flint, and so I know the importance and the value of having generations work together. And that's what I've really been excited about here in Americorps as well. As one of the older Americorps members, I have met so many young people who are in the field serving all the time. And I just love their hearts, their energy. And what I hope to give back to them is just a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of that old school mentality, and we put the two together and it's amazing. But they energize me, and I hope that I energize them as well and show them that service doesn't have to end. The advice that I would give others who are thinking about doing service with Americorps is take the plunge, go for it. You will be so glad that you did, and I really believe that you will end up receiving more than you can ever give. So try it out. You'll love it.
Hello. It's so great to have you here today. I love Charlotte's story of going home and building community. It's such a quintessential story of making something of a difficult time. It's been a challenging year for everyone. And there are countless stories that I hear again and again of Corps members who have found stepping up to do a service here to be a pathway to connection to their community and to other opportunities. If you're just joining us, where have you been? Just kidding. Welcome. You're in the right place. A quick tutorial on how to use Hopin. On the right-hand side, you'll see the main stage, sessions, networking, resource expo. That's where and today we're going to spend most of our time in the main stage. On the right, you're going to see a chat function and a people tab. And in the people tab, you can direct message participants or me or my colleague Brian or anyone that has an organizer name if you've got questions. We'll be recording main stage presentations today as we've done with the other days, and we'll post those up in the coming weeks so you can go back to them. And we want to hear from you. So don't be shy. Drop your thoughts and questions into the chat. It's great hearing from everyone across the country about what they're doing, but also questions as well. So let me just do a quick recap of where we've been the last couple of days. We spent the first day sharing more about the Flint model and talking to the Flint team about how they set their community up for successful collaboration, determining who their lead organization would be, and thinking through the nuts and bolts of how to build an effective infrastructure. We also rolled out the National Service Community Challenge Grants, an opportunity to apply for one-to-one matching $25,000 awards to advance your community's priorities around national service. Whether that be about doing local and equity-focused recruitment together or doing technical assistance and providing funding for new Corps member host sites, we'll leave that up to you. It should be a strategy that's focused on your community's needs. Yesterday, we learned about the amazing 27-to-1 return on investment in Flint, and Kristen introduced the Universal National Service Principles. Strategies related to those principles are now in the Challenge Grants booth slides. So if you go to the Expo booth, you could maybe right-click and open a new browser tab so you don't leave the stage right now. You can go and see those slides from yesterday at some point today and see more on those Universal National Service Principles of strategies around those. We broke yesterday into 4 panels around support for those serving. Those sessions are going to be recorded, so I know you were able to go to 2 of them, but you'll be able to go back and see the others after the convening. And at the end of the day, the national service, at the end of the day, we had small group conversations and got to look at what national services kind of true piece is, right? It's a people-powered strategy for community development. So I want to jump into today's next couple of hours that we have together. So we've got a really incredible lineup, and I hope that you'll kind of buckle up and join us for the next couple of hours. First, you'll hear from Dreema Gentry at Partners for Education on what it takes to go deep in a place and how to utilize national service with a focus on rural communities. Then we'll have a phenomenal panel with funders from Austin, Tulsa, and Philadelphia on why they invest in specific communities around national service as you think about increasing funder investment in your community. We'll hear from a Corps member, Ian Agee, who we're a big fan of. Charlotte and Ian have just been all of these Corps member stories have just been so fun to put together the last few months. So let's get the show on the road. It's my pleasure to introduce Dreema Gentry, the Executive Director of Partners for Education. Dreema and I go pretty far back. We met about 8 years ago outside the national service space. She was a partner for the Southeastern Kentucky Promise Zone, an initiative I was establishing at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Dreema is a creative problem solver working to strengthen outcomes in rural Kentucky and across the country. She's now taking her model nationally, again through partners. Please welcome Dreema Gentry.
Hi, Brooke.
Hello, so good to see you.
It's good to see you. I wish we were there together, but thank you for having me here today.
Yeah.
And so, thank you all for having me. I'm going to share some about our work in Appalachian, Kentucky. But first, I really wanted to place us within that Service Year Alliance frame. We started with Service Year Alliance in 2016 when we really began that journey of talking about being an impact community. And our work, my place, is Appalachian, Kentucky. We came into the relationship with Service Year Alliance as a rural place and with service baked into what we do. And really this idea and belief that place-based work really can disrupt inequities and create opportunities. And we found with Brooke, with the Service Year Alliance team, a group of folks that really it resonated with us. And I'm so happy over the last couple of days to learn more about the Flint model, because the work in Flint has really influenced what we're doing both in Appalachian, Kentucky and nationally as we're working in rural places. So I'm happy to be here. I'll just sort of step into this. And Jonas, thank you for doing my slides. You can go to the next slide and we'll get started. I do my work in Appalachian, Kentucky. I'm from Appalachian, Kentucky. And this is a place that statistics often say is one of the hardest places to live in the nation. But I call this place home. My family first came to Harlan County in Eastern Kentucky in 1792. Now, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that when they came to that place, this had been a hunting ground for multiple indigenous communities and people who had nourished the place and the land for generations. And unfortunately, when folks like my family came into the place, we actually didn't nourish the land and treat it with the same respect. But this is the place I come from. I see the place. I appreciate the place, the people, and the potential. And I have to say, I'm really tired. And actually, I get angry at times around the stereotypes, the anger that's directed at this place in this point in time by people who've never visited the place, who don't understand the people and the culture. So this is a place of persistent poverty. And research will show that in places of persistent poverty, where a large percentage have lived in poverty for more than 30 years, the culture changes. You start to get that systemic inequities. But I also think what you get is a sense of hopelessness in young people and a sense that this is my lot in life and there's nothing I can do to change things. And that's why I come to work every day, because I know that education can break that cycle. I was one of those young people. And I know that education combined with service can actually provide hope and agency to young people, because I see that every day in the work that we do in partnership with schools and partnerships with communities. So it's why I do the work. It's why I created Partners for Education 25 years ago. And honestly, when I first started the work, I did it in this simplistic piece that it was about programs, that I needed to create programs that would get kids from middle school to high school to college. And what I've learned since then is it takes more than great programs. It actually takes building hope, building agency, building capacity in young people, in communities. It also takes calling out the inequitable systems and working toward that systems change. So that's sort of where we are at this work now, thinking about this, which brings me to how national service entered into our work. So the national service, we started doing Americorps, probably 2011 through the school. It was a partnership between Department of Ed and Americorps. So we had never done Americorps. And so we did this school transformation grant where we started to say, okay, let's combine Americorps with all this college access programming we were doing. We started this in Leslie County, which is in the heart of the coal fields there in Appalachian, Kentucky. And it's interesting, if our Americorps program had been a manufacturer or an employer, our 20 members would have made us the second largest employer in Leslie County. That tells you the size. So what we did is we went into a school that was low performing, Leslie County High School, and we placed 20 members in the high school so that every young person in the school would have somebody that was working with them on coming to school. Chronic absenteeism was one of the indicators that we tracked, that they would work with them on planning for college and thinking about their career. And so what we saw when we started implementing this Americorps program is that, yes, chronic absenteeism rates went down, high school graduation rates went up, but we also saw that it started transforming not just the school, but the district. Having this influx of folks that were actually serving in the school, showing up every day. And like Charlotte, who was from Flint, who welcomed us today, the folks doing the service were local people from the community. And so it was transformational. It made me realize that as we do our work in Appalachian, Kentucky, we have to integrate service, because service will help the kids, but it also helps the residents, and it can also transform schools like we saw in Leslie County. So if you'll go to the next slide, Janice, as we started doing this, the work with National Service really helped us to develop out the model of Partners for Education. So our model is place-based. It's really about addressing the program gap, cradle to career. So we have home visiting programs that are working with parents of 0 to 3-year-olds in partnership with Save the Children. We have programs, community school programs and academic programs from elementary to high school. And then we have programs to connect with students in post-secondary or to help connect with disconnected youth. So it really is about the program gap and addressing that program gap. But it's also about building capacity of local leaders. And when we think of local leaders, we think first and foremost of the residents, the family members that live in our place. And it's our work to develop their capacity. And what we have found is that Americorps is a phenomenal way to build capacity of local folks, to give them an opportunity to reset their journey toward economic mobility. And so I think that all of this ties in, right? And then the other piece is the ecosystem, that it really is this idea of this fostering an ecosystem where everyone in the community has the opportunity to serve. One of the things that we think about a lot in the work is that we have to do something, and we're actually trying to work with Ann Mora, and I know she spoke with you all yesterday, and others around in the field. How do we make service more equitable? The residents that are serving in my Americorps program are living in poverty, and it's unconscionable that they should also have to be doing a year of service and still living in poverty. So we have to change that. That is one of the pieces around this ecosystem of service that we have to push on. I was happy to see Charlotte from Flint do our introduction, because our core is a core that probably 40% of our members, we have 80 members, are over what a lot of folks would think would be the normal average age of Americorps. They're folks that are restarting their careers, or they've retired and they want to give back. And what we see is that intergenerational aspect of our core is powerful, especially in developing the capacity of the members. And so, yes, so this is our model. This is what we do. If you go to the next slide, you can actually see some of our core. And I love this slide because it's getting things done. And when I think of Americorps, that's one of the first things I think about. The people who actually take up that mantle, agree to serve, and step into service, they're doing it because they want to get things done in their community. And actually, they remind me often of how you get things done. You get things done by collaborating, by working with other people, not thinking about who's getting the credit or not thinking about, the why, getting it done. And so one of the things that we've tried to do as we're working as Partners for Education is start to think about how do we adopt that abundance mentality that Americorps members hold so naturally and apply it to how we do our work. How can we step back? How can I step back from competing for grants with other people and thinking about, I have to get that grant versus the partner down the road, or thinking about, we need to fund early childhood in this country, not adult ed, or vice versa. Or this dichotomy that we see too often that it has to either be rural or urban. And so those are the pieces that I'm trying to step forward. And Brooke mentioned that Partners for Education, we do our work in Appalachia, but we're starting to think nationally of how can we work in rural places. We have some funding from the Balmer Group to start thinking about what would a resident talent development pipeline look like. That's a lot of jargon, resident talent development pipeline. But we know that that is one of the things Americorps is, right? National service is that. What would it look like in rural places? And how can we also expand from just thinking about national service that's funded by Americorps to think about how philanthropy could be invested and get engaged and how they could actually fund fellowships and different types of service for folks from our community. So again, it's about getting it done. And I keep this picture up often and I go back to it when I start to find myself getting caught in this scarcity mindset that I have to be competing or I have to protect my place, to think about how do I hold this mindset. So, all right. We're here and we've spent the last couple days together. A piece of this learning we're doing, and I want to do another thank you to the folks at Flint who've taken the time to share their model, is how do we work together and what can we do to get things done? Some of the action steps that I have, and I know we've talked about in the last couple of days, and we're going to have time at the very end to think about our own action steps. But what I'm doing every day is how do I work to expand opportunities for national service? How do we influence policy? How do I also stop thinking outside of purely Americorps and federally funded? And how do I start pressing private philanthropy to actually step in and fund national service? And I guess another piece of my work too is also thinking about how do I work with that same philanthropy to also think about funding rural America, right? So it's national service in rural America. The second one is, how do we connect more residents, more young people to national service? One of the things that I see is that we don't have enough programs that's actually providing opportunities for disconnected youth to use and to experience service. And so how do we do that piece? How do we learn from what's happening over at the Aspen Institute around disconnected youth? How do we get more disconnected youth into service? How do we also think about service that fits residents with different backgrounds, right? So this picture here is the guy in the picture, his name is Dana Coots. And it was so perfect that Charlotte introduced us because Dana was one of our members. When we started our Americorps member that very first year, he was a member. And Dana actually grew up in Leslie County. He was a teacher. He had been a principal and he had retired. And he realized that he wasn't ready to stop having an impact in his community. So when we rolled out an Americorps program, he was one of the first folks who said, hey, I want to serve. And I have to admit, at first I'm thinking, okay, I was thinking traditional Americorps. I wasn't thinking a retired educator stepping in to serve. But what I realized after engaging Dana, having him be part of the Corps, is that he was able to then mentor and have that natural intergenerational relationship with the members. And the Corps became that intergenerational group that supported one another. And one of the things that we've lost in Appalachian Kentucky is that intergenerational family connection. And what we started to see is that some of the members, both the older members, the younger members, if you think of age, started flourishing because they had that connection. So Dana was a member. He did his 2 years of service, and then he came back to work with us to actually be a site coordinator there in Leslie County. And in this picture here, he's in a boat in a flooded area of Leslie County. And I remember he called and he was like, there's these floods. We have parts of the county that is cut off. Those folks need food, they need supplies, and they need their homework. So I want to get in a boat with one of the teachers from the school, and we want to take supplies to them. Now I'm a lawyer by training. So at first I was like, no way, can't get in the boat. Then I started thinking about it. Wait a minute. He's from there. He knows that. He's going to wear his life jacket. So he sent me this picture. And this is really what service is about. It's actually meeting the critical needs that communities have at the moment they have them. And so I was like, sure, do it. See what and I keep this picture. This is another one I keep with me a lot because what it reminds me is local people know what the needs are. It would never have occurred to a member not from there. It never occurred to me because I'm not in that community. I'm here in Berea, right? I'm a couple of hours away. That, hey, we need to flex and we need to get in the boat and we need to make sure these folks have the food, the resources they need. So it reminds me again that we have to invest in national service. We have to create opportunities for residents to serve, for young people to serve. And that if we do this, we will see outcomes like we saw in Leslie County, where the school improves, that transformation piece. So that's our story. That's the work that we do here in Appalachian, Kentucky. And I'm really appreciate having the opportunity to share our story with you all. So thank you. And Brooke, I guess I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you, Dreema. I always love hearing your thoughts generally about the work that you're doing in Appalachia and rural communities across the country. But I think you threaded a lot of pieces that we've heard throughout the convening, really about going deep and investing in people in a place. And that's really what this is all about. It's the reason that I do this work. And I know it's the same for so many leaders that have joined us throughout the convening. So in the end, service years are a community development strategy. What struck me is how you started doing this work thinking about serving high school students and it as an education strategy and their transitions to post-secondary education. And then you saw the power of service in transforming the lives of those who were serving at the same time and the impacts those residents, the recipients had from that service as well. Yesterday, Jenna, who's on Dreema's team, Jenna Meglin, who is great to work with, she shared in the Pathways session how you guys are investing in pathways for core members and seeing the results of the capacity that's being built across local organizations of having Americorps alums continuing in the school system, continuing with partner organizations. What I also love about what Partners does is that the approach isn't just about Partners for Education. It's not just we're going to be this organization who's going to scoop up all these Americorps members, but really how you've been able to support other organizations. So I know you've brought that to the other impact communities of sharing how you guys have really targeted organizations across the entire region. And this is, dozens of counties and thinking about where you could build that capacity over time. And with that, really building the capacity of people and organizations across the entire region of southeastern Kentucky. So thank you for all you do and everything your team does as well. Thanks. And to me, it's not just similar to what we heard from the Flint team on Tuesday, that they started with this focus on education and they saw the impacts to core members. And they also have this multi-generational approach using multiple types of programs. So they've used VISTA for different things and CCC for short-term pieces of people moving in, Americorps state and national grants. And then they're also seeing this network of alums across community organizations, really just building this long-term path to community leadership and civic leadership. So we're going to move next into a panel with funders who've invested in national service as a place-based strategy. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So thanks everyone who'll be on in a minute. You've heard a lot in the last few days about the work in Flint and other communities across the country. Philanthropic partners are the cornerstone of this work. Not only do they play a role in resourcing these efforts, but they can help convene partners and get them pointed in the same direction. This is a really important session because it's an opportunity to hone in on how to bring funders to the table in your own community. So we've got excellent panels, an excellent panel of funders from across the country that we're going to bring on now. Awesome. Wonderful. Thanks to having you all here today. Do a sound check. Does everybody's sound work?
Thanks for having me.
I think so.
Awesome. Okay, well, you guys get settled in. So in a moment, I'm going to reach out to each of you and ask you to introduce yourselves and then ask a few follow-up questions. And then we'll move into a question and answer from the audience. So people, as you're hearing things, please put your questions into the chat so that we can really help you think about how you can build this out in your own communities. So my team's going to pass those along to me. As we embark on this conversation, I urge you to think about the lessons you can take home in your own community, how you can engage philanthropists in this work. And I think with this, it takes so many different partners for national service to come together. Yesterday, you heard from state service commissions. We know local government has a big role to play as well, higher ed and other anchor institutions and communities, obviously organizations that run national service programs, United Ways, other backbone entities. There's a lot of partners, and we really encourage you that you're bringing funders to the table as well. So without further ado, let's hear from our panelists. I'll kind of ask you each a question, and you can introduce yourself along the way. So let's start with you, Carrie. Folks have gotten to meet you a little bit, but we've heard a lot about Flint. So can you introduce yourself? Can you talk a little bit about how you and the Mott Foundation got involved in national service, and then probably more importantly, why you got involved. So your personal story as well would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Brooke. And good afternoon or good morning to everyone, depending on where you are at. We're so glad that you could join us for day 3. And again, wish we could be in Flint in person so you could just see, right, and feel the members and the impact that we know that we are having here. But this is the next best thing. So appreciate you all joining. A little bit about me is I have always had a background, I would say, or passion of youth development and education. And then also got to have a wonderful opportunity when I was in college, so just a few years ago. I'm going to pretend that's true, a while ago, to actually serve on the Michigan Community Service Commission. So I had been really involved in my community and at a statewide level and was appointed to the commission as a youth commissioner and ended up serving on the commission for 9 years. And for those who are learning the national service lingo, the Michigan Community Service Commission is one of the state service commissions. So from the panel yesterday that Kyra moderated, they are then the ones who are receiving and helping to distribute the state and national funding for Americorps. And so through that, really got involved and passionate about national service, and then continued on at the national level and actually served on the board for America's Service Commissions. And then later on, actually managed a VISTA program, statewide VISTA program. And so national service has been a passion of mine because I know it works. I've seen it work. I've seen it have the impact on the members, the community, the organizations that they're serving in. And it's not just impact for a day, it's long-term impact that you will see for years to come. And so that's really why I continue to stay involved in national service. And so when I came to Mott, the Accelerator was kind of just starting. And so it was a chance to really come to the table and see what the possibilities could be. And I think we heard a little bit on Tuesday, the first day, that Mott is a partner at the table of the Accelerator. It's not that relationship of a grantee-grantor. It is really a partner. And Jamie Lee said it well from the United Way here, right, is that she'll air out that dirty laundry. If something's not working, they tell us. And it's not because she doesn't want to tell us, or usually the fear would be, right, that funders are going to take away funding. But we want to know and help try to fix it, try to help continue to improve our model. And so that's really why the foundation has been involved, is that we see national service as a way to help support the things that are needed in our community. While we are a very large foundation, we still can't give money to every single organization in Flint and throughout the United States. But what we can do is support the Accelerator, who is then able to support so many more of our nonprofits here in Flint and really make sure that they're having the biggest impact that they can and to shore up their capacity. The last thing I would just say is that as a result of the work here in Flint, and then also the knowledge and skills of and passion of national service, we have then taken this work nationally. So we also support a National Vista project that helps to support our statewide after-school networks to provide additional capacity. And then I've also been working with America's Service Commissions in the last couple of years to look at how do we start new Americorps programs in support of after-school programs. We know that for every kid that's in an after-school program, there are 3 waiting. And so we want to see how do we leverage Americorps to help ensure that more kids can actually have access to after-school programs. So Brooke, I would say it's the passion, it's knowing that it works, and knowing that this is the right strategy for us to keep having that bigger impact and make a difference.
Carrie, we were lucky a couple years ago to work on after school together and trying to expand resources around Americorps and after school, which was really great. Marisol, I'd love to turn to you next. So can you introduce yourself and talk a little about the foundation's work in Austin and what prompted the foundation to support the collaborative efforts of Americorps Central Texas?
Sure, Brooke. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here and with you all. I've had the chance to pop in and out a little bit of a few sessions over the past couple days and have been really inspired at the work that's going on across the country. So really glad to be here. I'm Marisol Foster of the Weber Family Foundation. We are much smaller than the Mott Foundation. We are an education-focused family foundation. We're based in Austin, and we offer capacity building and general operating support grants to nonprofits in the Central Texas and the Washington, D.C. regions. And in partnership with our grantees, our primary goal is to help underserved youth perform at the highest levels of achievement in academics and in the arts. And our journey working with National Service was a little bit of a simpler one, in that most of our work began directly supporting a lot of our existing education grantees with Americorps models that were already existing. And generally that type of direct funding supported a nonprofit's capacity building goal to expand program reach or offer training or professional development, developing data systems and tools, and also supporting flex funds for emergency needs. And through that kind of direct funding with each grant that we made, we saw the many benefits of national service, both for the nonprofit and our communities, as well as to the individual. And so a few years ago, in 2018, we were approached by Americorps Central Texas, which was then Serve Austin. You may have already all heard about this extraordinary collaborative, which is comprised of about 9 area direct service nonprofits that are working to build a more local and more diverse service community. And their initial goals when they approached us was to improve member recruitment. And we knew that those types of goals were very much so aligned with what we were hearing directly from some of our existing Americorps model grantees, that while Americorps funding was available, they were really struggling to fill those seats. And pretty quickly, we realized that while continuing to support each of our grantees separately was really important, the opportunity to support collective work would help multiply all of our impact. And that's really what made Americorps Central Texas so unique and compelling to us. It was our first sort of larger entry into this world of national service, is that we had these local leaders prioritizing and addressing community issues at a community level, knowing that collective muscles would get them much farther together than by working alone. And that doesn't really happen all that often. So it was really exciting and inspiring for us to be a part of that and learn from it. And I'll brag on them a little bit more, but it's worth sharing that this particular proposal from Americorps Central Texas was a really significant factor in the foundation's decision to increase our investments in supporting broader community and sector capacity building work. So we're really proud of the work that they're doing, and we hope that we can continue to be a part of that journey.
I love that, Marisol, how you started with supporting individual national service programs. And what I always take from the Americorps Central Texas team as well, who are phenomenal, is they decided that humility piece that Dreema talked about, of not saying, we're at odds with each other. We're all competing for this limited funding pool, of saying, what can we do together that could advance all of our organizations? And I know they're grateful for the support that you've provided. Brandon, so let's go a little bit north from Austin to Tulsa. I know that you have a somewhat similar approach. Can you share more about the Kaiser Family Foundation's approach and why the foundation turned to national service as part of the approach of investing in Tulsa?
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm really excited to be here with all the panelists, and good afternoon, or as you say, good morning, depending on where you are here in the country. And I'd like to say to all of you, welcome to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We here in Tulsa, I serve as a program officer with the George Kaiser Family Foundation on our Vibrant and Inclusive Tulsa team. At GKFF, we believe that no child is responsible for his or her status at birth, but yet it determines how successful that child might be in life. And so we take a two-pronged approach in really making sure that each child has an equal opportunity. We have what's called our Equal Opportunity Team, and they focus on access and equity. And then I serve on our Vibrant and Inclusive Tulsa team, because we also believe that the environment in which a child is brought up in has an extreme impact on that child and the opportunities that they have. And so we believe that each child deserves a vibrant and inclusive environment to grow up in as well. And so with that, we really do lean into what service looks like and really how we build community through service. We initially started off thinking about it just from the standpoint of education and how do we make sure that the schools have incredible teachers for all of the students. And what we found is it's not so much just about that teacher or that individual coming into the school, but they're also coming into a community. And so how do we make sure that each of those people coming into our community feel supported, feel like they have opportunity, but also that they can grow and be effective in other parts of Tulsa? And so what we do is we completely wrap our arms around the community in that way as well, making sure that each of those teachers, whether it be a core member through Teach for America, whether that be an Americorps member through the various programs that we service here, but just making sure that each of them have an opportunity to truly get embedded into our community. We also know that by 2025, 27% of the workforce will be Gen Z. And we know Gen Z is extremely passionate about working for a company or being a part of something that means that they're having a positive impact on society. And so that's really the other areas that we lean into, is it's not so much about what they're doing just specifically in their workforce or in their day-to-day, but how are they really making an impact outside of that and really changing our community for the better. And that's something that we believe in wholeheartedly as a foundation. So it's definitely a partnership that we lean into year after year and continue to increase.
I love that, Brandon. I love just that pathway, right, of thinking what happens to this core member for their education results, but also thinking about that they are really getting invested in the community, which I saw in Baltimore as well, that there's a lot of people still in the classroom now, principals really invested, even as I think the head of the state legislature for the state of Maryland. So finally to Leo, let's turn to you. I know that the Philadelphia Foundation plays an important role in your community, not just in doling out dollars, but in convening and aligning partners. Can you introduce yourself and talk about the approach the foundation has taken to partnering on national service?
I'd love to. So Leo Odding, I'm an officer at the Philadelphia Foundation on volunteerism and CSR, corporate social responsibility. Before that, I was a volunteer manager for Dow in the Northeast area, but germane to this, before that, I did 3 years with Peace Corps in Madagascar around youth agency and volunteerism, and then before that, 2 years with Americorps in Columbus, Ohio. So volunteerism is the love of my life, the center stone for everything that I want to organize my life around. And so the Philadelphia Foundation, it's jokingly, and they're trying to change this, kept secret within Greater Philadelphia. Not a lot of people know about it, but it is one of the, if not the largest capacity building grant making organization for nonprofits in the Greater Philadelphia area, supporting Greater Philadelphia and then the collar counties. And so 2 years ago, the foundation celebrated its 100th anniversary, and the board said we're going to double down on increasing and bettering the lives and livelihoods of Greater Philadelphians. But what's more than that, we want to position the foundation as the convener, the connector, and the accelerator of community-based initiatives. And so they said one of those areas, it should be volunteerism. And so when I heard that, I jumped at the opportunity to be part of that journey that the Philadelphia Foundation was going to start on. And some of the ways that it does that is through partnering with an organization called Catch a Fire, which allows for skill-based volunteerism in a online capacity, a virtual capacity, and then also being the hosting organization for the Greater Philadelphia Corporate Volunteer Council, which is a practitioner, community of practice of practitioners of employee engagement within the corporate sector. So that's where the Philadelphia Foundation came from. At the same time, the city of Philadelphia, specifically under the Office of Civic Engagement and Volunteerism, had started a national service task force that had different stakeholders from across the sector: city year, Penn Serve, the city, higher education, and then some corporate sponsorship coming in through members. And then the Philadelphia Foundation heard about that and said, this is something we should definitely be in, because national service is volunteerism and bettering not only those individuals, but the community as well. And so that task force is specifically around, REMIT is around expanding the demand, supply, funding, and awareness of service year opportunities in Philadelphia. Think deconstructing the stereotypes that we all know service years have on individuals who haven't participated or only see it very superficially from the outside. And so that task force, one of the, I think, novel things that we have been able to put together, it's been done in other places and we copied, but through a generous grant from the corporate sector to the city's Office of Civic Engagement, we were able to design a National Service Diversity Accelerator Fellowship. Basically what that will do is it will lower the barriers to engage otherwise disconnected Philadelphians to get into national service, with a specific focus, but not limited to, individuals that are economically disadvantaged, BIPOC, LGBTQ+, living with disabilities, and then access or in access to stable housing. And so when a service member applies for a service position, they can also apply for this stipend that will help fund them. And so a person who wouldn't be able to do it, and I'm going to use a charged term, and live on a poverty wage, then might be able to. And so the foundation, in positioning itself to act as a thought leader to this group, is currently its best way to support national service in the Greater Philadelphia area.
Awesome, Leo. Thank you so much for all of the service you've given. And I just love, every month when the Philly team gets together, like Leo is part of the meetings. He's there. He's a thought partner, which I think we've heard is similar to many other communities too. So thank you. So we have an incredible panel. I will note, I've got some questions for them, but I'd love to open it up to Q&A in a little bit. So don't be shy. Put some questions in the chat for us. Comments are also welcome, but let's make this conversational. So let's jump into, just how, as you reflect on the investments and approach that your foundation has made, what's a piece of advice that you'd give to a community leader who's joining this convening and interested in figuring out how to forge that relationship? So what if they don't have a Carrie Pardo who's already interested in national service? How do you get them interested and build that relationship out in the first place? So I'm happy to throw it out to any panelists, but Carrie, maybe we could start with you of what advice do you have for community leaders?
Sure. A couple of things. One is, I think, Brooke, what you just said is partially right, or it is right, but bigger even. National service is confusing, right? It's hard to understand the inner workings when we're talking about things. Sometimes we get so in the weeds of talking about, MSY and all kinds of things that when you're saying that to funders who don't understand national service, they're just going to have a blank face, right? And you've lost them. So don't get so in the jargon when you're talking. But if you do need to get into that, make sure you're really taking the time to help explain what is Americorps, what is national service, and how does this really work? And think about it from their perspective of investment and leverage. right? Because that's what they're going to want to look at. I think the other thing that is important is, and from Mott, while we love national service and we support it, we don't just fund national service to fund national service. We fund it because it actually helps us to further our goals as grant makers. It helps us to have a bigger impact on what we're trying to do in the community. So for Flint, for instance, right? Again, we want to support our community. We want to support them in whatever it is that the need is, whether it's just implementing the master plan that we heard on Tuesday, to then being there when the water crisis hit, to then helping to support with the pandemic. Whatever it is, we are usually behind it and wanting to support that. And supporting the Accelerator then allows for the members to do that at a much broader scale than what we could even do. If you think about it from the after school perspective, so that is one of our longest term, like standing program areas. So then you're thinking about, okay, if my funder that I want to approach is invested in, let's just say, education, then go in with that lens, go in with that conversation. Don't just talk about, again, national service for national service, and that it would be great to then bring people together for recruitment or those things. You'll get to that. But what you have to do is say, you know what, we really want to leverage and utilize national service to support the work of education in our community. And here's how we see it connecting with what you're trying to do. So I think those are a few of my recommendations. But I'd love to hear from the other panelists as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Marisol, for you, how do you what advice do you have for communities?
Sorry, working to unmute here. Yeah, I first just want to say thank you, Carrie, for saying so. National service is confusing. And I'd say that in Austin, the Weber Foundation has had the ability to jump in relatively quickly to a new funding relationship with Americorps Central Texas, despite this not really being in our wheelhouse. Because first and foremost, we had longstanding relationships with so many of the organizations individually, and they had the same with each other. And so, there's no hiding the fact that we already had a dedicated group of really visionary leaders with different backgrounds, with different skill sets, and with different organizational missions. But they all work together for years and have tremendous respect for each other. And we know that's what makes Austin a bit of a unique case. What they did do exceptionally well was that they used those relationships and then the clear data that they had to act, to educate us. One of the smartest things that they first did was to enlist a talent managing director, Natalie Gray. Many of you know her. She's been an incredible ally and just instrumental to this work. And then together they were able to develop collaborative agreements, which for a funder like us really helped us better understand what the purpose was, its powers, the responsibilities. They assigned a fiscal sponsor. And then once that happened, it just really took off. And over that year, they built awareness and additional partnerships, a database, advocacy. They identified a shared set of goals and strategies, and then they fundraised to support those goals. From the outside, it was like head spin, and the speed at which they were able to do that and move was really impressive. And it was even more evident when the group had to adjust and fast track strategies in response to COVID and a lot of the racial injustice work. And I'll say that through every single step of the way, what they came to the table with was transparency, with vulnerability, with an interest in learning from one another, as well as learning from the process, which is allowing all of us to have these really honest expectations and deeper, meaningful conversations. And so because of all this, when they came to us and they shared these collective goals, which admittedly were ambitious with improving member recruitment and retention and DEI work, they had all the detailed plans that made it really easy for us as first-time funders to jump in with a greater degree of confidence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like coming together kind of as an aligned group was really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the start. Brandon, I'd love to look at kind of the latest effort that you've had to around the Tulsa service year, which I know was in response to COVID, but just, how you've been able to like engage the community and advice, I guess, that you have for our audience today, for, community partners, whether they're running a national service program or they're kind of the like stakeholders and supporters of it.
Yeah, I really appreciate those points made by Carrie and Marisol. Those truly dictate, exactly the way we think about and really approach how do we partner and what does it look like to partner deeply. We are an organization who don't consider ourselves just a funder, but we want to be a partner in the work. There's a joke that goes around Tulsa that says we don't just, write a check and get out of the way. We write a check and get in the car with you. And so as we think about what national service looks like, especially as, for us, like tying it to our goals, one of the goals that we aggressively chase is how do we increase the capacity of our MSA, and really what does that look like from a diversity standpoint? We are very intentional about that, and sometimes the national service models that we've engaged with very much like sometimes are in a contradictory space to that. And so wanting to make sure that even as we're building pipelines, that we're doing so with a very intentional lens towards diversity, towards equity, and how do we make sure that that is the type of, candidates that we're going to see coming into our community. And so we had been thinking about for some time the work that Baltimore was doing with Americorps to make sure that their local community had the opportunity to engage in service. And for us, we pour a great amount of support into our K-12 system. But what we saw that we weren't allowing opportunities for those students to specifically get involved in service here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And really COVID did fast track that. All of a sudden we saw students who would typically be interning at some other place, around the country, were here in Tulsa because COVID had either canceled their internships or things had gone more so to a virtual model. And so what we ended up standing up is what we call Tulsa Service Year, really thinking about what does that look like for someone who has just recently graduated from college, or to have that opportunity to pour into, the community here in Tulsa. And so we partner with our nonprofit partners really to stand up a 1-year service agreement where we not only provide the resources in a grant form for this person's salary, but we also are looking at what are their living arrangements, how are they getting connected into community. And then the other thing that was extremely important for us is how are we showing this person that we believe enough in them that we'll not only think about what it looks like for them to be here, but what are their plans after this 1 year of service. And so we started to look at the professional development. We started to look at how are we helping them think about, graduate school, whether that is in Tulsa or another place. And then specifically, what does it look like for them really to think about either continuing employment at their places or at their places of employment through service year, or what are some opportunities for them outside of that? One of the conversations that I appreciated so much I had with an intern, even this past summer, the intern was sharing with me that they took a gap year before going to college, and I was very interested in why they wanted to take that gap year. And he said that I had not had enough life experience, to decide what it means to study in college or what path I wanted to chase. And he said he went on with his gap year, he did a year of service in California through Americorps. And he said through that program, he was able to figure out what versions of himself he needed to let go as he entered this new phase of life. And we took that conversation, and we're also looking at what does it mean to stand up kind of a gap year program for high school students. So students from Tulsa who might be looking at taking a gap year before they go into college, that we can also get them committed to service here in Tulsa as they learn those things.
That's amazing. We feel like there's so much potential in the gap year space to be, not a year of sitting on the couch with the pandemic, but actually going out and doing something in your community, and that there's so many benefits that a Corps member can get from that. Awesome. For Leo, can you talk about, from your perspective, I know it's a little bit different than like the actual dollars, but, what does that role look like, and what advice do you have about how communities can engage the foundation, but also the corporate partners that you've done a really great job of connecting in?
Yeah, I'd love to. Because of where my passion sits and where my position sits at the Philadelphia Foundation, like I explained briefly, and you alluded to, corporations are at that intersection. And I feel when one looks at corporations and conceptualize them, we think about right away, we go immediately to the corporate foundation. And corporates are more than just dollars. They actually have a wealth of expertise, skills, and institutional knowledge. And what's more, and this is the key thing I feel, again, I love volunteerism, is they're made up of individuals just like ourselves that want to give back, that want to see their communities be better, and want to be a part of the organization they're working for, doing and delivering on that. However, they just might not know how to get to that, how to do that, or that there's an option that they resonate with. And it's just to make it obviously clear, I'm talking about the employees of those corporations. Their specific passions, leveraging to the initiative or the program or the idea that you want to get to. They could assist in building that web page. They could assist in scoping the project. They could assist in finding extra funding dollars. I could go on and list probably like over 100 different ways that they could help you, but they don't know what it is you're doing, to the point that Carrie brought up. No, I forget who actually said it now. There's a confusion around what national service is and just the different programs. So helping the corporation understand that, then they can message to their employees, because their employees might have children that want to do that. They might be like me and have done it previously, but tapping that potential that is in a corporation, I think that is, let alone what we should all be aspiring to, because then once those employees are engaged, they'll go back to their employers and say, I'd really like this to be funded, either through a Dollars for Doers program or being on a board or in some capacity that maybe has yet to be articulated in. So bringing those corporations into the conversation at the beginning and not directly just focusing on funding, I feel is the best way that you would be able to get to that wealth of knowledge that sits in the employees or in the employee resource groups or in the teams that might just be around strategy and marketing. And maybe that's what you need to launch your initiative into that next level of getting funding.
One of the things I remember from years ago, before coming to Service Year Alliance, was I went with the Department of Education to Philly, and Americorps was one of the programs that we got to meet with when we were there, and they had an employer panel. And so thinking about Blue Cross Blue Shield, like these different employers who now had alums that had been through their program and now we're serving, and thinking about those corporate connection points too, that there's just so much potential for what's there. We have a question that just came in from Brian at Montclair State University. Brian, great to hear from you. So what is it that the panelists like about national service itself? So not their projects, but what aspects of national service appeal to them? Anybody want to start with this?
Sure, I'll lean in here. And thank you for your question, Brian. I think for me, and I would even go as far as to our organization, what really appeals about national service is that there's all of these folks from around the country who are mission aligned. We're very big in our community around being aligned on the mission, and really we're able to figure out like how the other pieces go together. And so the idea that if someone's really interested in a national service model, there's 9 times out of 10 that person is actually mission aligned with us. And so there's this very clear funnel of talent that comes into Tulsa through national service that we're then able to really work closely and collaboratively with to have an impact.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just add to that, Brandon. I think we have unintentionally seen a pipeline created from the Accelerator, that when we think about this, when it was being created, that wasn't one of our intentions, but it's happened, and it's amazing where we are then able, because we have 75% of our members are from Flint. So we really recruit locally, which then provides our community members an opportunity. For some, this is their first job, and for some, it's re-engagement. Similar, right, to the stories I think that we heard earlier today, right, about the retired principal. This is a way then that we've seen people get re-engaged in their community and to find their passion of what they want to do next. And so I think that pipeline piece has been great. The other thing is just really about engagement in the community. We have seen people then fall in love with their city again and fall in love with their work and helping people. And that's what we need in this country right now, more than anything, right, is to be able to help each other and to give back and to really want to make sure that your community is receiving those benefits and that we're all working together. And then from a funder perspective, I'm going to say this part is the return on investment. You got to hear yesterday from Ann Mora about the return on investment here in Flint, which is significantly higher than other communities. And it's because of the investment that we made with the Accelerator and the amount of members that we have here. But as again, this is just a suggestion when you're talking to funders and trying to engage them, it is, for every dollar they invest, here's what's going to come back into their community that they care about. So those are just a couple additional things to what Brandon said.
That's great. That's great. So invite questions to continue coming in. Thanks, Brian, for that question. There's been a couple comments in the chat as well that I'll let you guys go back and take a look at later. Marisol, you talked a little bit about the second year increased stipend that you guys are investing in Austin. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit more about, how that's played out and, why that was something that was important to Weber.
Sure. Glad to do so. I'll start by just saying that I can't say enough how important it has been for us to lean on our nonprofit partners to keep us in the loop about how all the different national service models there are, about the cost benefit ratio of Americorps programs. They did a lot of heavy lifting, sort of echoing what Leo and Carrie and Brandon have already said. But that's been really, really important. But in addition to that, because we have a close relationship with so many of our grantees, they've shared data with us on the advocacy work of increasing Americorps living allowances. One of our nonprofit partners even convened a group of funders to experience what a day in the life of a service member in Austin actually looked like, and had us each prepare a monthly budget for a typical service member. I don't think that's something that any of us had really done, and needless to say, it was an eye-opening exercise for most of us. For us specifically, I think investing in pilot grants, like increasing stipends for second-year members, really helped us learn what works and what doesn't. We're strong believers that in philanthropy, when possible, we need to be stretching ourselves, especially for family foundations, to be making riskier grants. If all of our grants are successful, then we're not really taking enough risk and we're not doing it right. So we know that in Austin, it's one of the most expensive cities to live in the US, that rent is on the rise, and living allowances on the average were just not enough to encourage members to continue with their service. We also know just how incredibly difficult and time-consuming recruitment, training, onboarding, all of that is for our nonprofit partners. And most of the nonprofits we work with, they don't have dedicated staff to help manage this process. So we know that every time they were facing member attrition, that staff was being pulled from other meaningful and important work. So when we had the opportunity to support member stipends for returning members, the data just supported our decision for us, along with One Star and the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. And I'm proud to report that the numbers are pointing in the right direction, that in its first year, yes, thank you, Brandon, our grant partners saw their numbers of returning members either double or triple from previous years. It is a little bit hard to fully connect the dots between the increase in second and first years because we're in a pandemic and because there may be other motivations, but we are really confident that increasing stipends didn't hurt return rates.
Yeah, Natalie was crunching those numbers one day with me, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing what the results have been just so far with things getting started. Awesome. That's fabulous. So kind of in closing, and we have time for this, so don't feel like you need to rush through it, but if you had to recommend just one next step. So I think the hardest thing sometimes is just there's so many possibilities of what you could do together, Kristen laid out yesterday, I think the 5 universal national service principles. And so thinking about like, okay, what do we want to focus on first? What do we want to do? If you had kind of just what the one next step should be for leaders who are listening today and excited about building a funding partnership and trying to get something going in their community, what would that kind of one piece of advice be? That thing that they should do next? Who's ready?
I'm more than happy to share.
Cool, Leo, thanks.
This has been mentioned by every one of my fellow panelists, but I'll just state it clearly, is understanding motivation alignment. One was mission alignment's been thrown around, transparency, vulnerability, furthering goals. But when you understand who you're asking, who you're going to, what they want to fund, what they want to see as the return on their investment as a funder, when you're able to go to them and say, not, I want you to fund this, but say, I have this problem, and I think what you like to fund fits into it this way, then you've gone from a yes-no binary option of we'll fund you or not to, oh, I love that idea. I can definitely probably put some funds, or maybe not now, but later, or I could possibly also use some internal services, offer those for free, and then further your mission, and we could work together on that. Even what's better, they're more open to say, well, this doesn't, I know now the issue you're trying to solve, this doesn't work for me, but I have a network that I can share with you. When looking at funders as more than just that cash, but as a true partner of mission alignment, I feel it opens up a world of synergies, and it's no longer 1 + 1 is 2, but emerges into a 3 or 4 something else.
Yeah, I love that true partnership. And early on in the thinking, I think is so important that you don't need to have this fully baked idea, but just start laying things out. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. When I think about this question, the advice that I would give really anyone is really if you invest in people, you get community development. And if you invest in place, you get gentrification. And so really thinking about how all of this work comes back to investing in people in order to make a place better, not necessarily making a place better, and then potentially moving people who are there completely out of the system. And that's something that for us, we've continued to push forward and really thinking about how all of our work, whether that be the work that we do through, national service, whether that be the work that we do of beautifying neighborhoods, or even the work that we did in beautifying parks and building kind of one of our prized possessions in Tulsa, that is the gathering place. All of that comes back to how are people, at the core of that, how are people developing themselves throughout the process and with the projects? And then also, how are people seeing the benefit directly to them as you're moving forward?
I love that. I feel like I just need that quote. I've been repeating it in my head since you said that a couple of weeks ago when we were talking through the panel. So important. Awesome. Marisol, what about for you? What's that kind of one action that you think community leaders should take?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to ask your funders, your supporters for help. Ask them to invite their networks to come out to something really concrete and actionable, to a group site visit, to a meeting. There's tremendous power in numbers, and oftentimes those sorts of introductions are really what helps facilitate longer, more meaningful relationships. So I would say be vulnerable and reach out and ask.
That's great. Thank you, Marisol. Carrie?
I mean, I feel like they have said it all. Truly, right? So I would just reiterate, I guess, just a couple of things. But I think, Marisol, I would even add to yours is, have them engage with members. Have them talk to people even who are alum, so they can share their experience, how Americorps impacted them. But then also have funders hear from the host site organizations, that is in the weed talk. So the organizations that are hosting members, your nonprofit organizations, your education agencies, etc. Hear from both sides. What did the member do? What did they get out of it? How has this impacted and changed their life? And on the flip, for the organization, how has Americorps members hosting national service members impacted them? How has it changed their strategy? We hear a lot of times here in Flint that because of our Americorps members, that the nonprofit organizations actually connect in a different way and connect more efficiently and effectively here in Flint, because members, right, there's no barriers. They just all want to work together and support each other and help. And sometimes we stay in our lane as a nonprofit. And so looking at all the ways it really impacts, I think, Marisol, you're right. It's really going to then help a funder understand what it is. And I would also say, in addition to just asking, is lay it out there, lay out the challenges, put it out there, the good and the bad, and ask the funders to be a true partner in helping to solve it, not just focus on the money. The money will come, or they will open up doors, as Leo said, right, to others, but really engage them in that thought partnership.
I think that's starting early and having that authentic conversation. I think sometimes when I'm working with communities, they're afraid to reach out, right? That they have to have. We've done a lot in the past of even just practice pitches with new service year concepts, or with our impact communities and community partners, just so they can practice getting over that nerves of starting that conversation, but realize like, you guys are all people too, and foundations want this, want to see these outcomes in their community, and National Service really does have that triple bottom line that it can really speak to mission alignment with what the foundation is looking for. So I think that's so important. There was one question that came in, I think maybe from the Service Year Alliance team of just, I know we said we'd wrap up, but we've got a few minutes, so I'll throw it out there of just any specific advice to other funders. So I know we've got funders in the audience, we've got funders that will be coming back and listening to this later, but wondering if they're wondering if they should invest in national service, like why is this a good investment? Why has this been a good investment for you all?
I can spell it out clearly, and I think I alluded to it before. A service member provides to the community, and then they learn about the community, and then they might want to stay in that community. And then because they've built service, they're going to give back to their community forever. Even if they don't do the second year, they have seen I know for sure service just gets ingrained with you through national service, and then they're going to become an active giver, philanthropist, donator of time for the rest of their lives. It's really a feedback loop that just goes on.
It's amazing.
Leo, I would just echo that. We actually now have some former members running for office, right, locally here. I mean, we are creating this pipeline, this leadership, but it's not leadership just for the future, but for now too, right? We need leaders right now. The other couple of things I would say to funders is to take a chance. I think, Marisol, you said it beautifully, right, of taking risk. Like, we have to take a risk, and this is one worth taking. It is going to pay off. It's going to have an impact. But also make sure that you think about your return on investment. Again, how do you stretch your dollars? So how can you really make a bigger impact with what you have? And the last, of course, I would put a plug in. We launched it on Tuesday, but through funding that we have provided to Service Year Alliance, we are going to be, or Service Year Alliance, will be offering challenge grants of $25,000 for up to 4 communities. It is a 1-to-1 match. And this is a way to help inspire other funders to get involved in this, to help support these communities as they're really making significant impact and change. And so I would encourage all of you to reach out if you're not currently talking to people in your community, and see if this might be something that you could help support.
Yeah, one of the things that we did a poll yesterday as we were getting started of how many people participating, leaders in the audience, are already working among their service year programs. And it was about 76% said that we're already working together regularly. So that's like this glue, right? That you're already talking to each other. And now there's this ability to take it to the next level by working to do some investments. And I think what we've found is we've seen communities take on this work across the country. It's really important to have a staff person who this is their job. It may be 50% of their job. It could be a little less than that. Hopefully, you can get it up to a full-time position eventually, but having somebody who can really orchestrate the day-to-day, who can do this work is so important. And so making that be a possibility that, sometimes you can get by with volunteers and everybody doing this on the side, but it's really important that's something that I hope communities, find a way to figure out to invest in. Awesome. Okay. You all have been fabulous. I'm so thankful for your time today and for your longstanding commitment to this work in your communities. It's really inspirational to see what's going on in Flint and Tulsa and Austin and Philly and so many places across the country. So just thank you for the commitment. Not just, it's not just about dollars. It's really that true partnership and trying to see the results in community.